All right, well, good evening, everyone. We'll ask you to take your seats and we'll get started. All right, well, I'm Dr. Felicia Evans. I'm the Director of School Leadership here in the Shaker Schools, and it is my job this evening. I get the pleasure of moderating our forum tonight. We have been working through the process of looking at how cell phones and social media are impacting our students throughout the school year. And so I also know personally as a parent of a fourth grader and a sixth grader that how difficult these decisions and conversations can be. So as we proceed this evening, I hope that we keep an open mind, that we respect differing viewpoints, and that we really strive towards really gaining feedback that really enhances our students' learning experiences. I just want to thank you for being here. I want to thank you for your commitment to our school community, and really thank you in advance for the dialogue that we're going to engage in tonight. So a couple of our objectives this evening, we really hope to engage in a productive conversation. This is really going to be an interactive dialogue, so you guys are in tables for a reason. We have some note catchers on the tables for a reason, because we really do want to hear a voice. So we also tonight are going to share some draft restrictions, so we're going to ask for some feedback on that. And really the draft restrictions that we're going to propose really have considered student well-being, educational equity, safety, and really our learning environments in our classroom. And so that is kind of the priorities that we're looking at with these. And then most importantly, we really want to hear your feedback. We want to hear what you're thinking. We want to give our panelists a chance this evening to share some of the things that they are thinking, some ways that they've seen cell phones personally impact the work that they do in our schools and our community, and really continue to engage around cell phone restrictions within our schools. So I want to start with having our panelists introduce themselves this evening. Why don't we start with Mr. Julie and we can go on down.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Eric Julie, and I'm the principal here at Shaker Heights High School.
Good evening. My name is Winter Dunham. I am a 7th grade student at Shaker Middle School.
Hi, my name is Baji. I'm a 10th grader at Shaker Heights High School.
Good afternoon. My name is Martinique Future, and I'm a parent for Shaker.
Good evening. I'm Emily Geyer, and I'm a social emotional support counselor at Shaker Middle School.
Good evening. I'm Detective Kurt Falke with Shaker Heights Police Department.
Good evening. I'm Joe Konopinski, high school history teacher.
All right, thank you. You can see from our panel, we have a wide range of stakeholders up here, and so I think this is really going to be a good opportunity to hear from all perspectives across our school. So a couple of things. We do have event handouts on the way in. There was a table, there were handouts located there. We also have a QR code. If you want to save them and get digital copies, we have that for you as well. A couple of logistics for this evening. So this is going to be structured around 3 prompts. So our first prompt, we're going to show a video, and we are going to ask at your tables that you have a dialogue about that video. Then we're going to ask kind of your thoughts on that, and then we're going to turn it to our panel and ask our panel their thoughts on the video and their thoughts on what they heard from you all. The second piece we're going to do is we are going to share some data that we have collected. We had the opportunity to give some surveys in March to staff, students, community members, families, and got 3,000 responses, which, as you can imagine, this is a popular topic. So we will share that data. We'll ask you guys to dialogue around that, and then same thing, we'll have our panel give some reflections on that. And then the last piece we are going to reflect on is our actual proposed draft restrictions for our schools, which is on your table as well. So we'll ask you to talk about that at your tables, and then we'll kick it to our panel for some reflections as well. So that's kind of the structure of how this evening is going to go. There's also a note catcher on your table, and so if there are things that you're thinking, jot down those ideas, those sorts of things. We're going to collect those at the end just to make sure we're capturing as much feedback as possible. So, all right, so let's get started. So this first prompt is actually a video clip.
Creating cell phone-free classrooms. The latest push coming from House Bill 485, proposed legislation that would ban cell phones and social media from K through 12 classes across Ohio.
It's created physical conflicts in terms of, staging fights, filming fights, posting fights on social media, bullying, fake threats at the school, gun threats, things of that nature. and it's really a distraction from the educational process.
At Akron Public Schools,
seen the meekest and mildest of children turn into the Incredible Hulk if you try to take that phone.
APS Director of Security says a new policy put the district ahead of the problem.
We've had students admit that unplugging from their phone during the school day has been a good thing. It's lessened their anxiety.
The policy started this year, preventing phone use in class. How does it work exactly?
Okay, so you put your cell phone inside the pouch, you press this locking mechanism, and it's locked. And the student keeps it with them throughout the day. Then at the end of the day, they approach an administrator who has this magnet. You touch the magnet, your phone comes out, and you're on your way.
The Ohio Education Association is in the process of analyzing the Ohio House bill before supporting or opposing it.
We certainly welcome the focus that policymakers are placing on this issue. We know, hearing from teachers across the state, that cell phones can be an incredibly distracting influence in schools, and at times can lead to harm.
It takes a lot of the burden off the teacher in the classroom as well, because they don't have to be the phone police.
In Akron, Maya Belai, Fox 8 News.
All right, so actually an update we got this morning, the House did pass that bill and it's actually been sent to the governor's desk to be signed. So we do anticipate that we will actually be required within the next year to implement some sort of cell phone restrictions. So what I'd like you to do is at your tables, just talk about what resonates with you. What did you see in that video? What did you hear in that video? What are the implications that you heard in that video? So we'll give that about 5 minutes, and then we're going to actually ask tables to share out your reflections. All right, so if you'll wrap up your conversations, bring us back to the large group. So we do have a couple microphones that are circulating. So if there's any tables that like to share some highlights of your conversation, if you just raise your hand, we'll get you the mic and you can share.
Hello, everyone. Good evening. My name is Shemaine Keith, and I'm one of the school counselors at the middle school. And I proctored, so my table and I, we were just discussing some of the things that, that I've noticed, especially in the classroom. And I proctored the state test. I had a small group of, we had kids that they're so addicted to their phones, rushing through the state test in hope of getting their phones back at the end. So that's just affecting so much. Like, they didn't care about the scores or anything. So I told her, I'm like, no, you cannot get your phone back until the end of testing. Almost fell out of the chair. It was the worst thing ever. But what that did is that when that student heard that information, the next day, the rest of the kids took their time. I can tell some of them were taking their time because it didn't matter. They all knew that they could not get their phones back. Mm-hmm. But it's just a huge effect, negative effect on our students.
Thank you. That's a good example of how the cell phones are impacting our students. Thank you.
Hi, so I have a fourth grade, my oldest is fourth grade, and then I have 3 others, first grade, upcoming kindergartner, and preschooler. So my kids don't have cell phones yet, and we don't have any. I plan on not giving them a cell phone for as long as possible, but I am here tonight to support this. I think schools should be phone free. Already, my 9-year-old is begging for a phone because she thinks everybody has one and she wants one, and I know how addicting they are, and I want my kids to have a childhood. So I am so in support of this. Everybody I know is in support of this, so kudos for all of you for putting this together.
Thank you. I know there's a resource called The Anxious Generation, and it's a really great book if you have not heard of it or have not had the chance to read it. I believe it's in the resources that we're going to share at the end, but it speaks to the impacts of cell phones, especially on childhood, and the need for going cell phone free and having more free play and those sorts of things. So thank you for sharing that. Anyone else? Right back there.
We're recording. Really quickly. We have a couple of friends. It's a sixth grade friend that actually are leaving to other schools specific to cell phone stuff, just because they think a lot of the fights and things like that are happening, and they want more academic focused. And so hopefully they come back after we put a policy in place. But
Yeah, thank you for sharing that. That is a priority, is, focusing on teaching and learning and removing the cell phones so we can do that. Yeah. I don't know if there was another hand over here.
Good evening, everyone. I'd like to offer, I have a daughter who's a 10th grader, but she is the third of my children to come through Shaker City Schools, and I as well support this initiative to get this done. Ironically, I just left a family member that is a student at Warrensville High School, where this has already been implemented, and I've learned that the students know how to get the phones out the bag. What I would like to offer the group or propose, which is something that I think is what we need to talk about. While I understand we cannot legislate morality, I think that we do have to look at, if we're looking at behavior modification and putting some things in place, I think along with this initiative, we should somehow address or put this alongside of some kind of digital citizenship awareness or some kind of understanding along with that. Because without understanding, we're only penalizing the children, and it's not going to be as effective if it doesn't apply to all of the students. I would say, or venture to say, not all students really understand the dangers, or sometimes the negative effects of their cell phone use in a learning environment. So with everything else, I think that there needs to be some kind of understanding or some kind of protocols for digital citizenship as well with this.
I think you're absolutely right. You hit the nail on the head. In the survey that we gave, that was one question, is what support do you need? What do you think we should be doing, not only to limit cell phones, but also to teach appropriate behaviors on social media and those sorts of things. And the feedback was clear that our families need support with that as well. So it's not only the instruction we're planning to do next year with students, but we also plan to do more formats like this where we're giving parents the resources, because we often see if there are restrictions in place in school, but then they go home and they have free reign to social media and other things, and problems still occur. And so I think you're absolutely dead on, is that those are the things that we need to do and will plan to do throughout the school year as we roll this out. So thank you for that. How about our panelists? What reactions do you guys have to that video, to the things you're hearing? Oh, I'm sorry, there's one more. Okay.
Sorry. No, actually, I was going to echo what you said, and I appreciate you bringing that point up, because at the middle school, we do go into the classroom, throughout the school year, and one of the very first things we do is talk about the impact of social media and technology use on your mental health, because we have someone come in and talk about the legal side of things, but I think it's important for students to know how it does affect their mental health. And surprisingly, students are aware. It's not that they are lost on that information. I think that peer pressure, this developmental age to be like peers and have access to them at this time is very, very hard. And I was sharing with the table, and they all kind of echoed, like my nephew, he's a junior here. And I was surprised that he was like, yeah, I think if everyone doesn't have their phone, I would be okay with that, because you're not missing a text, a notification. They're not telling them to meet up somewhere because no one has their phone. And I think if we take away that pressure, as well as continue to educate them and support families, it's going to be a long climb, because it's something new and it's hard for them, but I think ultimately we'll see the dividends on the back end.
Thank you for that. Panelists, what are your reactions, thoughts on the video, or things you've heard so far tonight?
Want to go down the line?
Yeah, sure.
I think the video that we saw is a really helpful framing to see, to also begin talking about the Yonder bags themselves, because one of the things that we have conversations about here is whether or not it makes more sense to use a Yonder bag or it makes sense to use a shoe caddy in a classroom and put phones into that. And I guess I'm struck in my own cell phone usage. I have a work phone and a personal phone that are basically with me all the time, and there are plenty of times where I find when I'm talking to my children or my wife, and I find that one or the other of the phones is in my hand, and I'm responding to a text or I'm texting without even realizing exactly how it got there. And I know that our students struggle with the same kind of thing. And there are times when my parenting life and my principal life intersect. But here's one where the school-based life is different. It's complicated to say to students during the day who aren't your own children, you need to put your phone away, right? You need to give it to me because you can't stop being on it. And kids, in my experience, think of these phones, it's a little bit like saying, give me your arm right now, give me your left leg. And kids respond in a way of, I couldn't possibly give you my left leg. I need that. I will bleed to death if I give you my left leg. And so for me, when the woman in the video said these very nice people turn into the Incredible Hulk when you ask them to give up their phone, that resonates with me. That's an experience that I and we have regularly at the high school. And so, it's my perspective that while the Yonder bags may feel extreme to some, it's that experience of talking to other people's children and asking for a phone to be put away that is a unique experience to the professional educators, grades 6 through 12, and one that's incredibly important important and complicated to think about.
I feel like when we will get the Yonder pouches, it will solve more, dissolve more conflict, because when we have our phones in school, you're often getting texts, hey, meet up at the bathroom to watch this or this fight. And being in the middle school, walking through the hallways, I do see people, taking photos, sending texts on FaceTime at lunch and stuff. I just feel like it will solve more conflict and make the school better and our community better at the same time.
Hi guys. Okay, I definitely say that this is like a huge learning curve, because everyone has their own experiences with you're used to having your phone away all the time, you're never on it, you're getting your schoolwork done, while other people just go period to period just sitting on their phones. So I definitely say it's everyone's gonna have their own experiences. Some people are gonna wanna break into the bags. Personally, I feel like I can kind of just go along with it. I definitely go off the idea of if everyone else doesn't have their phones, then I feel like I'm not missing out on too much. Where, yeah, if I'm getting my phone taken, then it's not the biggest deal if everyone else is too.
So I would say that I was kind of torn at first about the cell phones. My biggest thing was emergencies. So if my son needed to reach me in an emergency situation. But then I had to compare. So I have a junior and then I have a 5th grader. My 5th grader, her phone is in her book bag. From the time she gets to school, when she gets on the bus, she's coming home. And that's because I'm tracking her, just to see where her bus is and where she's at. My junior, I know he's on his phone during the day. I'm pretty sure. But I really do think that everybody not having their phones would be a benefit, because no one has access to anything. So there's no communication, there's no, like you said, I'm not missing out on anything. And I think it would just bring some of that anxiety down with our kids, because my punishment at home, when you don't do what you're supposed to do, the phone comes to me and they have a heart attack. So I know exactly what it does to them at that point. So that's where I stand.
Yeah, I would say what comes to mind, after watching the video and hearing these comments is, for me, I just reeled back the years. I've been at the middle school 14 years, and I was not an anti-technology person per se. I'm not a Luddite. I let my kids have phones when they got to high school. But doing counseling and mental health support at the middle school, I can say without reservation that I have never seen a more devastating circumstance and condition than the access to phones that the kids have during the day. It is the most extreme change for the worse that I have witnessed. And it's not, I think we have to consider the safety, absolutely, and it means the district has to prioritize that, as I know they will, in terms of communication and information to parents so that people can have their fears quelled a little bit. So that's on the district, and that really needs to happen. But for me, it's not a reason, because I see the damage and the danger and the negative effects every day that's happening to these kids in terms of psychological safety, their emotional safety, and frankly, their physical safety. We can't keep up with the number of fights at the middle school that are always attached or exacerbated by phone use. Like she said, Winter said, they're constantly texting each other, meet in the third wing bathroom, or people want to fight because it's going to be recorded. And their brains have been hijacked, and I feel like we also victimize the students with our policy of taking the phone or setting them up to be responsible for something that they can't be responsible for because their dopamine systems in their brains have been hijacked. This is an addiction. And I think, I know kids who want to learn about to the mom's point over there from the high school, I think kids would really love to have a whole semester on brain development, how the dopamine system works. It's something whenever I talk to kids about it, they're very interested in. But even knowing that, if everybody has a phone, that is not enough to stop them from reaching for that phone. If we take their phones away, then they can learn this stuff and maybe absorb it and start to utilize it in their life. But if we keep their phones with them and expect that we can teach them about how it's affecting them, I don't think that they would have the mind power to separate themselves from that. So I'll pass it along. I have more to say later about their loss of autonomy and independence, which I think is also a really important topic that I hope we get to.
From the video, what resonates with me is just some of the things that I've seen as a detective. I took over the juvenile investigations last fall, and just in that short amount of time, I've seen dozens of cases that all stem around cell phones, whether it be bullying, harassment, fighting, sharing inappropriate material. It's constantly happening, and it's only a handful of them that actually get reported to the police. The school does a good job of trying to handle and investigate a lot of those things themselves. But that's what I observed.
What I observed from the video is that there was a moment where the students sort of realized that this was a good thing. And I think that we can get there. And I would be thrilled, I would be excited to teach at a school where I did not see a cell phone. Because currently, I see them all the time. And it is a constant battle every day. For the most part, the students that I've talked to about this, they're aware that it's not good for them, but it's too addicting. The cell phone was created to be used, and it's almost like they don't have the choice to put it down. They are going to use it. It doesn't mean that we, from the teacher's point of view, we still couldn't create good 21st century lessons. We are a one-to-one school. We do have Chromebooks. We can utilize those more and teach kids how to use email correctly and calendars correctly and all those wonderful things that we hope that they would at the point of giving them the Chromebook in the first place.
All right, thank you. I think that actually is a good kind of segue into the survey that we gave. So in March, we gave 4 surveys. They were sent to certified staff, so that would be classroom teachers, counselors, that sort of thing, classified staff, which would be like bus drivers, lunch monitors, paraprofessionals. We sent a separate survey to families and then another one to students. And like I said earlier, we had 3,000 responses, over 3,000 responses, which we do survey a lot in Shaker, and we never get numbers close to that. So I think this speaks to the magnitude of how this issue is really affecting all of us. But as you can see here, that different groups responded differently. So the piece of data that I pulled out for us to discuss today is, should the schools create policies and enforce greater restrictions on student cell phone use during the school day? So that was kind of the prompt, and this was the answer. 60% of our students agree. 85% of our families agree. 92% of our certified staff, so teachers, counselors, administrators, agree. And then of our classified staff, bus drivers, paraprofessionals, and secretaries, 51%. So given that data, seeing that data, I would ask at your tables, have a conversation. What do you see in this data? What are the implications for us as a school district, as a community, given that this is where we're at? And have that conversation, and then we'll report back out. All right, I'll ask for you to wrap up your conversations. All right, so same format. Anyone want to share the conversation highlights from their table?
Thanks. One of the things that I was curious about in looking at all of this, and we were speaking about it at our table, is I'm in favor of this, so thank you for bringing this up. But also, will there be a policy for the adults in all of the buildings? So I like that you have the policies here for the students, but will there be a policy for the adults as role models that the students are also aware of? Not just like in your meetings you say, oh yeah, let's try and be role models, but that the students know everybody is working on this in the building together. Thanks.
That's such an interesting question, and we've gotten that a lot. I don't know, Mr. Ju, if you want to share some of the conversations you've had with staff.
Yeah, so we, we haven't put this in place yet, right? So we haven't put something in place for staff yet, but we're certainly already having the conversations. And it seems a little disingenuous to do this just with kids and then not at all with staff. And so we're in conversations with lots of other schools that have already enacted these policies. And I'll say there's a range of responses on the staff part. At Xenia High School, which is one of the schools that we talked to outside of Youngstown, they have about half the staff that is committed to having their phones away all the time in the same way that the kids do. And they're working on they're finishing up their first year of this, and so they're working on increasing that. And so I don't walk around with headphones, in our school, but it would certainly feel inappropriate if I did, right? To do that while we're asking something different of the kids. So we're early in the discussions, but we agree that that's a conversation that has to occur here at the high school, and we think district-wide as well.
Hello, my name is Valerie Tatum. I'm a paraprofessional at the middle school. Currently, there's a policy that they expect the paras to use computers that are from the library and everything. We don't have our own Chromebooks. And a lot of times you expect us to do power school testing and everything. A lot of times I get my information out of this. This does not mean I'm on there talking to my grandma in Alabama. This could be me looking up to see, is there a fire drill? Is there an intruder in the building? So it's not always personal if I don't have a Chromebook. I prefer to have a Chromebook to do my business, especially the power school testing and the surveys. But the current person that's in, who's walking out the door, her policy was, we don't deserve power books. and we're part of the staff. As working with special education department students, we deserve to have our own Chromebooks and not be on these all the time and be misunderstood as not paying attention to our students. Thank you.
No, thank you. You raise a really good point. Let's engage after this about the question about Chromebooks, because I know it's something that we're looking at and that we need to look at. I think that also raises a good point. On all of our cell phones, we have an app called Navigate, and it does, in an emergency situation, provide really quick, clear, accurate information to all of our staff. So there's sort of I think maybe a balance there that we would need to think about. But thank you for that. Yeah.
There's a few things. First, we were curious as to why classified staff is at 51% for cell phones, but I think you kind of alluded to that, so I appreciate that comment. Second, is there a need for an extra secretary or someone to take calls throughout the day? Like, is the demand for people getting in contact with their kids important enough where there has to be an increase in staff for something for secretaries? That was the second point, or the second question that we possibly had. And third is, what does it look like when the student comes in? Like, who monitors the person? Is it just security at the door, just making sure you put it into your own bag and close it? Or is it the first period teacher that watches it being done? And then that goes along with what are the consequences? Like, parents need to be involved. Like, if it happens one time, once a parent comes up and gets irritated with the fact that this is happening because my son or daughter tried to get away with it, I think that might nip it in the bud. And I think it was in the article also where you get the parents involved in that way. They know that when they come up to school, that's it. Then they'll just stop immediately. So I'm just wondering what our policies are going to be moving forward to make sure that if you do break the rule, what does that look like?
Yeah, this is kind of our first attempt, which is our next prompt coming up. But this is really our first attempt at this. We visited several schools. We've been in conversation with research experts. I know Mr. Julie has engaged the building committee at the high school around this. I don't know if you want to share some of the conversations you've had about details.
So just a couple of your points. You know, one thing that the schools that we visited who are ahead of us in this have articulated is the incredible importance of a system of getting messages to kids that works and that parents and students have absolute confidence in. And so, you know, now if a parent calls school and one of the administrative assistants calls the classroom, I think that the vast majority of teachers get off the phone and say, hey, Eric, your dentist appointment is moved to this time, your mom's coming to get you. But also, sometimes you can be in the moment and in the flow of a class and say to yourself, I'll give that student the message later, and then forget before, you know, and by the time the class ends. And so, you know, having a phenomenal message system is feedback that we've gotten from other schools that we will need to put in place. That you know, families have to be confident that every message that they, you know, absent the cell phones, if they need to get a message to their child, that message is getting through 100% of the time. And so, you know, in terms of the consequences, I don't think I don't think I'm ready, you know, here for the high school. Well, I'll take the second question before I hit the consequences. Just in terms of entering, you know, how we'll come into the building. You know, again, this is a conversation to help us to figure all of these things out. So none of this is in stone in any way, shape, or form. But, you know, for those of you who are high school parents, last week we started a new process for entering the building for not entering the building unless you have your ID on your lanyard around your neck. And I think that sets the stage for how we can add cell phones to that set of procedures. We have 3 different entrances that students come in when they are on time, and only 1 entrance when they are late. And we have adults at every entrance, 2 or 3, depending on the day and the entrance, checking for the ID badge on the lanyard. And if you're following our procedures, you're not delayed in any way, shape, or form. And if you're not following our procedures, you are absolutely delayed. And so it seems very plausible to add to that this, right? I've got my ID and I've got the yonder bag, and it's easy to tell that this one's empty, and also easy to tell if it's not. And so that's the beginnings of an idea that we're talking about as a staff about how we would do this. And then to the last point about consequences, we're going to have to come at this through the lens of health and wellness for students. There will need to be some consequences for kids who can't follow our expectations, but we have already used terms explicitly around addiction, and you don't treat, the best way to treat an addiction is not to just punish. And so there will be pieces and parts that, you need to be able to have the phone in the bag, or you need to give up the phone if you're refusing to put it in the bag. But as a staff and as a district, we are already having, and we need to continue to have questions have answers to these questions through the lens of student health and wellness.
Good evening. I got 2 high schoolers. Me personally, my son told me by me taking his phone from him that he was able to focus more. He was able to pay more attention to school, and I seen the slow increase in his grades. And me personally as a parent, when they ain't doing right, I take their phones and I bring the phones to the security desk. Tell them, hey, they can't have it to the end. And then also as a parent, I see that y'all gonna have these sent it home. The parent could put the phone in the bag and lock it before they even get into the school. I'm just being honest, because I'll take the phones from the kids before they even leave the car.
Yeah.
I'm just being honest.
And that's good because we've heard that, because we've gone back and forth with the decision, do we have them come home or do we try and, have them put them in when they get to school? And we've actually had parents say, can I use it at night and lock the phone up, lock it up at night, because it's such an addiction that kids, my own children and their iPad, they sneak in, I have to have every little code locked down and the screen time on, and they've got to have my permission. And but I think that this will be a helpful tool that we hope for parents at home as well. Yeah, it's a good point. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Kelly. I have a middle schooler, a Woodbury, and an Onaway student. We all, I think, at this table are in agreement with this policy. We just found the numbers fascinating. That the older, more developed brains, the numbers were higher. We had a couple of questions. If there's further breakdown of the data for students, like what ages of students filled out the survey, because it says 60%, but how low did the survey go, and what percentage of kids? And then we were kind of shocked by the 51% of the classified staff, and wondering whether or not the policies can be or will be enforced on the bus, because that is also a problem area with the phones. And then just kind of tagging on her comment, Nicole and I both sub, and when you go through the training, you are mandated, told, that you do not have your phone out. And so it is expected of you to not have your phone out during the school day.
And I should have clarified, so the student survey was 3rd grade through 12th grade. But we could have broken it down too, when we can, by high school versus maybe younger students. Yeah. Any other thoughts? Okay. I think maybe we'll start, Joe, with you and work our way back this way on the panel. What are your thoughts that you've heard from this?
In looking at the data, I was kind of drawn towards what the students thought, because they're going to be the ones that perhaps provide the most pushback on this. And the idea that 60% of them were in favor of this seems pretty high, to be honest. That's my own perspective.
That's the same thing that I noted as well. It does seem, I thought that the students would be way more willing to push back against this than they seem to be, and it seems like a lot of them know the benefits and they see what what their phones are doing to them and how much better their education can be without them.
Yeah, I would echo that. I don't know how they perceived the question in terms of greater restriction. To them, they might not have envisioned locked up the entire day. So I don't know if the percentage would be different. But I know that all the kids I work with are very well aware and able to articulate the negative consequences of this at the same time that they say, that would be really tough to be without my phone. You know, I've had one kid tell me, I'll fight to the death, you know, kind of half joking. But they are very well aware, and it's, I think, amongst the social emotional support staff, we use every incident that occurs as a learning opportunity to talk about the connection to the phone, whether it's how they feel about themselves, whether it's tears in our offices or fights, that usually has this common denominator. So I'm not surprised that they would say that they would be for greater restriction, but it's absolutely key that it's a policy that's consistent across the board. And the only way, as imperfect as it is, to achieve that to me is to lock them up in these. When we leave it to teachers, putting them away, having them put away in the class, we are then burdening the teachers with 10 minutes of class time in the beginning, kind of with that struggle. And then the kids still have them in the hallways and at lunch, and we see a lot of the consequences psychologically and to their growth happening there too.
So I'll say for the phones being in there, my biggest thing would be, and I know we spoke about kind of like baby steps with consequences, but consequences need to be the result, I guess you can say. They need to be strict, like they need to be like literally wrote down 1, 2, 3, 4. If you do this, this is what happens. But the biggest part of it is we have to get the parents involved. I think that there needs to be like a contract signed between the parent and the child, so everybody is aware that, hey, this is the policy, these are the results, these are the consequences. Because if you don't hold everybody accountable, then the kids are just going to feel like, oh, they're just against me. But if you have the parents on board, now you have parents that if something happens, now their day is interrupted because you have to respond to something about your child. I don't want my day interrupted at work. I don't want you continually calling me to say your child is not doing A, B, C, and D. The consequences need to be set, the rules need to be set, they need to be put in place, and they need to stand. I'll just give an example for me for as far as the focus with the phones. I literally told my son, like, he was having issues and lack of focus. I made it where at least once a week he has to go to the library. Go to the library, get a room, and just literally focus on nothing but work. When he came out, he's like, oh, I got so much work done. I couldn't believe I got so much work done. So now I'm trying to implement it with my daughter as well, which she gets her stuff done already anyway. But I make her go to the library too. So now we're all three of us, or I'll just send them to the library so they can just focus. Literally, I will reserve you a room. You go there, you do nothing but homework. That's it. But my biggest thing is the consequences. And if we're doing this, and if it's across the board, the rules need to be set across the board. Because if you handle it at a young age, when they're in elementary, now you don't have this problem when you get to middle school. Now you don't have this problem when you get to the high school. They already are aware that there are going to be consequences. And if they're not, then they just keep doing the behavior, because guess what? Oh, I got away with it this year. I got away with it. You know what I mean? So I just think it needs to be set in place and just across the board with parents involved in contract signed between parent and child, and everybody has the same understanding.
Yeah, I definitely say that, like, I, as a high school student, am not, like, oblivious to what's happening. Like, I see what's happening, like, the impact on my grades or the impact on, like, my social life and stuff, where it's like, yeah, it is a problem, and, like, it does need to be addressed, but to, like, what extremes it does. And everyone's going to have their different opinions, but it's obvious, like, based off the survey, in every category, at least 50% of the people agree that there needs to be at least something happening, where it's like everyone's like acknowledging this problem. Sure, they don't want to really admit, a lot of the students, I'd say, don't really want to admit that the problem is there, but it is like there, and you kind of do have to kind of adjust. And even with the ID policy that's been happening this year, you kind of have to like adjust to that. Yeah, like it's getting a lot stricter. You need to have your ID on. You need to bring your ID every single day, and if you don't, then there are going to be those consequences, and you can get sent home. It can become a disruption to your parents' life, where it's like the more and more like it becomes habit, then it's like less of a problem. And so I'd say like definitely it's hard in the beginning, but once if this like ends up as the solution, then the stricter it becomes. And the more you see these consequences, sure, you're not going to be happy with it. As a student, like, I'm not going to be super happy when it actually happens, but seeing this, like, it's actually happening in front of me, like, sure, I have to adjust to it, and I guess I'll follow, you know.
When I was looking at the data, I noticed about bus drivers. When I take the bus every day to go to back home, sometimes the bus drivers do have to tell like the students, hey, you have to turn on your phone or this and that. Or when there's arguments or fights on the bus, everyone will start standing up, and then the bus driver can't see where like he or her is going, and then it becomes a disruption to our safety, and everyone's worried about their safety. And then sometimes he has to stop the bus in the middle of like a light or something to just make sure that everyone's okay. And I feel like that it should also be something on the bus too to make sure that everyone's safe.
I think the data is saying to us that our community wants to do something different. I think that's a clear statement from this. And I know just from working in schools every day, after college, I lived in New York City, and car alarms go off in New York City all the time, and it just becomes sort of background noise that you don't even hear unless it impacts you in that moment directly. And it's a little bit like that with what every staff member in every building, especially with the older kids, has to say all the time. It's, put away your phone, put away your phone, put away your phone. And it just becomes like the car alarm noise that isn't really all that impactful until it directly impacts you. And so we need to do something, and I think the data is telling us that. One thing that's come up, another thing that's come up when we've talked to other schools, and an assistant principal who's leading this charge in Xenia, Ohio, said that after they got over the initial hurdle, and the numbers are great. I agree that 60% is a higher number than I expected of students to say that something had to change, and there will for sure be pushback. We will be, it's absolutely going to be some pushback from our kids that we'll have to deal with. But the Xenia assistant principal said that after getting over that initial hurdle, two things happened, one related to consequences and one related to behaviors. The one related to consequences was, sure, there are kids who try not to use the Yonder bags, but because the majority of the kids are, it just becomes incredibly obvious when, and now in an environment where phones are ubiquitous, in an environment where the majority of kids are doing the right thing, and that's what will happen, the majority of kids will do the right thing, having a phone out becomes incredibly obvious and uncomfortable, and that's some peer pressure as well in a way that we don't have now. And then in terms of the kids, the assistant principal at that school said getting over the initial hurdle was amazing because afterwards everybody got nicer. It was more fun to talk to kids in the cafeteria. Today, if I walk into the cafeteria at any one of these tables, you'll see everybody with their heads down on their phone and not talking to each other at all. And in schools where this is happening, kids are talking to each other. They're talking to teachers. They're friendlier. They're nicer. And so that's an outcome that I look forward to. There will be a hurdle. So I see the data saying to us, we got to make a change, right? And we know there's going to be challenges, and there will absolutely be hurdles. And then there's another side of this, which is, wow, we're going to talk to each other more. And those of us who work in schools, we love kids, right? And it's great to have the opportunity to talk to kids when they're looking at you, as opposed to looking down at their phone and pretending to talk to you. And so that's something that I think that I look forward to on the horizon.
All right, so that moves us really into the last piece for this evening. On your tables, you have a copy of the draft handbook language. So really, these are as of what we have right now, are proposed restrictions that we'd like to put in place in our schools. And so really, I think the nuts and bolts of it, preschool through grade 5, we are looking for the cell phones to be turned off, to be in their backpack from bell to bell. So when they come in the morning, it's turned off in their backpacks, and when they leave, they can turn it back on. And then grades 6 through 12, we are looking at the Yonder bags, bag to bag, bell to bell. So they would be in their phones would be in their bag as soon as they come into school, and then they would be allowed to unlock it when they leave school. So we do have some samples up here as well. We'll pass around so you guys can kind of see how these devices work. But we ask that you read this through, engage at your tables, have some conversation, and we'll follow the similar format. We'll ask for some comments and then have our panelists wrap us up. So. All right, I'm going to bring us back to the large group. All right, so you've seen the draft, you've read through sort of what we have in the works. What are your thoughts? What were the conversations? What were you guys talking about at your tables?
Hi, I'm Andy Wasserman. I'm the Positive Behavior Coordinator at Fernway and at the middle school. And I'm looking at this K-5 cell phone proposal. And I know that some of our fourth graders do have cell phones, and they might keep them in their locker, but if they get into trouble or if they're out in the hall, they'll go and they'll call their mom or whoever. So my question is, will there be a policy across all K-5 buildings for consequences, and then a separate one for 6 to 12? That's what I was thinking. And also, I was also thinking that, logistically, how are we going to do this? I'm thinking at the middle school I know kids go to one side of the building for the buses and another out front, and some kids go out the back. Who is going to be at all those doors to do that?
Yeah. So that's a good question. I think you guys saw the magnet, the unlocking magnet that's being passed around. Make sure we get that back, because that could probably go sell for a lot. But they actually have wall mount devices where some of the schools that we've talked to, like 10 minutes before dismissal, the custodians go and it's a wall mount device. You stick the magnet on, and so it's at the exterior doors as students dismiss. So there is the potential for that. So in addition to the handheld ones, you can put them on the wall.
We tested out the feature. Ms. Keith here put all of her devices in one bag just to see how it works, and they do all fit. My question is there a risk of like a watch breaking because it's in there with so much different stuff, if that's the case? And then, not related to the policy, but one thing that, in terms of kids learning more about like how to use email and calendar, somebody mentioned that earlier. That's very important from the student perspective too, because running the ACE mentoring program here, I try to run it all on and try to notify kids on Classroom, but they get inundated with emails that come from Classroom, and they don't look at everything because there's just a lot to look at. And I'm wondering if there's a lesson or something that kids can start learning how to do about how to process automatically some messages get highlighted for important or something, like something that they can interactively, like even use the calendar better, like become, like the adults do, we live and die by that calendar, like whatever's on the calendar. And kids should be able to see it the same way, but lots of times the classroom assignments go into the calendar, so you have like 12 different things to look at. So some things that we can teach kids how to do better if we are gonna be communicating more with just the Chromebook in Google Classroom a lot.
Yeah, that's a good point. And some things we heard as well, like coaches, how do we make sure, if coaches need to get a message that practice is canceled or something like that, like those communication channels. As well, some things that we've heard is that our email systems only allow like certain email addresses to be, certain email addresses can send to students. And so looking at like, can we like whitelist parent email, like each child gets like 2 email addresses or something that could be like whitelisted to go through our filters. Just some different ways to look at it, ways in which families can still communicate with their children and kind of get those updates if they're not able to access their phones. So.
We noticed the policy saying with the exceptions, for health-related concerns, and there was a good idea at our table that maybe, it could be obvious if there's a child who uses an iPad or something to communicate, and especially at the younger grades, it's sometimes obvious to kids if someone's using a device for health-related reasons, but once they get older and they mingle with every school, they might not know. So somehow marking, if a child has a phone that they use, say, to track their blood sugar if they have diabetes, that there's some kind of sticker or something, like a red cross or something that is on that device, so that they don't feel, and that other students know, that child, if they pull that out for a reason, it's for a specific medical concern, and that they, have been approved to have that.
So Yonder
device.
has thought of that actually, and they have Velcro bags for students that have a medical condition and need quick access to the phone. So we will be able to issue a Velcro bag to those students. So it looks exactly like the other Yonder bags, it just doesn't have a magnetic lock on it. It's Velcro, and they can instantly access it. So they will still have to put their phone in the bag, but will have instant access as they need it. Anything else? Well, let's go back through our panel. We've seen these draft handbook language. We've heard some thoughts. What thoughts do you have?
I think that the success of this lies in the logistical rollout. We have close to 1,500 students here at the high school, and so, as I look at this and hear, really good questions and very legitimate concerns about how we're going to do these things, I mean, 2 things come to mind. We figured out how to have school in this building with everybody needing to be 6 feet apart. And it felt like we were the Army Corps of Engineers when we were doing that. And if we can do that, we can do this. And we've spent the last 5 months here at the high school implementing what is becoming this is what we do policy on ID badges and lanyards. And as you heard Baji said, kids adapt. And it has become clear that you can't be in our classrooms and in our hallways without wearing your ID. And there are always going to be students who push back at that, and we're at about 30 kids a day, who are forgetting an ID, and we're at about, less than 10 kids a day who are purposefully forgetting an ID, and those are numbers that we can manage and that we can handle. And so I think that the way this is written is an opportunity to find that balance between health and wellness and sending a clear message with consequences and rules of this is the way this is going to be, and it's not an option to not participate, while also still making the focus of our day, teaching and learning, right, and not just on cell phones. And this is no good if I said before, put away your cell phone is the mantra. If all we're doing is still talking about cell phones, this still isn't working. But in talking to all of these other schools, regardless of how they have implemented it, regardless of the consequences, every one of them is saying they were able to get across the initial difficulty, and now they're talking about teaching and learning and kid needs in ways that they haven't before, and I believe that we can get there too.
Something that I was wondering is how will teacher and staff know that kids are putting their phones in the Yonder pouches? Because sometimes students can walk in and just say, oh yeah, I don't have my phone, but then whole time it can be in their book bag or their pocket or their purse or something, and they could be in the bathroom just playing on their phones.
Yeah, that's a really good point. And some things we've heard from schools is that it becomes very obvious because no one has them, so it becomes very obvious when they do. But I do think we need to be prepared for that. Yeah.
So I definitely say that I'm like one of the half of the students that actually uses my email. There's definitely like tons of emails coming in, every single thing that's going on with anything in classroom. Oh, your teacher left a comment, returned an assignment, posted an assignment. Anything that like teachers do, you get an email. And like I think you can like adjust that, but like I don't know, that kind of keeps me on track, and I like to go through my email, but then I also see people that like just stock their emails up and they have like 3,000 emails, and I'm like, yeah, I just can't do that. But yeah, I think it's definitely like the whole like Google format will end up being like, sure, that's like been implemented since the third grade, but like that's definitely going to be like a lot more prominent. But yeah, definitely like just like emails, and then with the IDs, like it's just going to become like, yeah, like adults like phone keys, wallets when you leave the house, but like sure, like now I need to realize, oh, I need my ID. Yeah, I have like 3 backup IDs, but like I need my ID every single time I leave the house. I need my phone. I always have my phone, Chromebook, ID, and that's like what I need to go to school. So I guess like Yonder pouches will end up being the thing that gets added to that list of, do you have this, this, and this, and yeah.
I first want to commend you because you read your emails. I know a lot of people that do not read theirs. And look at our kids, 3,000 emails, so commend you on that for sure. As far as the cell phone, so if everybody's phone is locked up, there's no peer pressure. There's no peer pressure like, hey, he's on his phone, she's on her phone. Nobody has it. Everybody, of course, has to, fall in line at some point. Yes, you're definitely going to have the people that are going to kind of give you battles, but at some point, you have to go with the flow. And then I think a lot of kids, as far as structure, so like a lot of kids, they may not have structure at home or may just have not had structure, period. When you give it to them, they like it. Like they won't, of course they won't tell you that, but they like the structure. It's something that's a constant for them. And if you keep it constant, now they know exactly what to expect when they come to school. The other part was, it definitely will get them to learn how to use their emails and prioritizing what's important and what's not. Because when you get into the working world, what do? We have to check our emails. We have to respond to our emails. So I think that's also getting them ready for the future as well.
I would just say, One, I'm incredibly grateful to our school district and to our administrators who I know have come together to push this forward, because it's been an idea in the making and a very frustrating situation for very many years. So I just want to express my immense and deep gratitude that we are moving forward with this, knowing that there are hurdles, but that the benefits will far outweigh the hassle. And I think on the other side of this, we might want to have a celebration at the end of next year about what a more happy and healthy year we had. With that, I want to say that I'm also grateful that so many people here tonight, I haven't heard anyone express they're not for it. Every parent that's spoken up has said they're for this. And so that's gratifying too, and maybe we're speaking to the choir, and because I know there are parents who will resist this. And I just, for me, I want to really stress the importance of informing parents, educating parents, and supporting parents through what might be a difficult mindset shift, because our whole society has been conditioned to expect certain access, immediate access, immediate gratification. And I see on a daily basis, as do all the staff I work with, and we talk about all the time, that many parents expect immediate response and access to their children. And Jonathan Haidt, and I mean, if no one's read, if you haven't read The Anxious Generation by Jonathan Haidt and the ideas he's proposing, I would highly recommend people take a look at that, because he's not just talking about safety in schools or the learning, how learning will increase. He does talk about that. He mentions since 2012 how test scores have plummeted and that it's worldwide. That's when everybody kind of had a smartphone in their hand. And so the research is pretty clear that he says that kids have become less intelligent. He goes so far as to say that. And I think that's true. I also worry that kids, as we have seen, have become much less autonomous, much less developmentally appropriately independent in their thinking and their ability to build resilience. And a lot of it is because through their phones and having them with them all day, they are in constant contact with a guardian or a parent. If anything goes wrong, if it's not a parent or a guardian, it's their friend that they're texting to go have their back and go yell at this other peer. But really the parent to student communication has become something that feels like it's for the benefit of the child, and parents are well-intentioned. So this is not a judgment, and I'm not criticizing parents. I just think this has become normalized, and so people expect it. But our kids are much less safe with that phone in their hand. From my clinical judgment, they are much less psychologically safe, and from a growth in terms of their development and their mental health, they are at much higher risk now of kind of damaging consequences. So we need kids at school to learn how to problem solve. We need them to also be able to go through their day not worried that their parent just got a progress book notification and is immediately texting them about why weren't you in class, or why did you just get a C- on your, I mean, I have kids in my office crying all the time with these are not made up. This is happening on a regular basis. And I've also seen texts from parents saying, why didn't you respond to me, right away when I texted you? And I think it's just become normalized, and this will be a gift to, the parent-child relationship if we allow some space, because teenagers are supposed to have space from their parents and some time to work things out without that. So that's just another aspect I wanted to harp on. Thank you.
I think this policy as a whole is a very good thing. And the only thing I'll add is that I think that with the implementation of it, you have to be consistent. The consistency is key, and I think a lot of people have touched on that.
I've talked to a lot of colleagues about a policy, and as the data said, we are all on board. And we're on board because we know that the truth is that the students that are struggling the most are the ones that are on their phones a lot. Recently, I started asking actually to see the screen time data from my students. It's stark. We have to do something about it, and I'm happy to move forward.
Okay, thank you. So let's talk quickly. I know we're over time, and I appreciate everyone staying and engaging in this conversation. Let's talk a little bit about next steps. So we do plan to continue to review this feedback that we've heard this evening, continue to review feedback that we're getting from students and staff in our buildings. We do have 2 board members here tonight. Thank you for your presence. We have Pam Scott and Doug Wang. We appreciate your investment being here this evening. We do plan next week to do a first reading of our district policy. So our district board policy is actually what governs the actions that we can take in the school. So that's really the first step, is to get that in place before we can start finalizing our school implementation plans, which we're going to continue to work on through the spring and the summer. Then we plan to, you will hear from us. You will hear from us prior to the school year starts, and as the school year goes on, about what our policies are, what our expectations are, how this is going to roll out, what it's going to look like. We want to make sure that that is clear. And then, we've heard we need to conduct ongoing education. We need that for our students. We need that for our families. And I think we're going to continue to learn as we go through this journey next year about what else we need and what else, what other conversations we need to engage in. And so I think that's our commitment that you can expect from our school district, is that we're going to support you along the way, as we hope that you support us as well with the restrictions that we're going to put in place. So. Just one other thing, we did have our April community forum. There was some really good information shared about just what can families do. The homeschool partnership is really important. We know that this is going to be a struggle for families. We know that students are really used to having access to the phone, so we know that you're going to need support at home. So reach out to us, work with us on that piece. Make a plan. You heard Baji talk about, I need to have this, this, and this. Put the Yonder bag on the list, right? That they're going to need to make sure that they have that. So make sure that you have a plan for that. Make sure that you have a plan for, if you know that there's a change that happens during the day, that your child knows that you're going to call the office, that you're going to give that information to administrative assistant, and then we're going to get that message to your child. So talk through those things. And also model healthy boundaries. We know that maybe without that access during the school day, you might see an increase in the evenings at home. You might see an increase on the weekends. And so help monitor that and help model that within your own social media and cell phone use. And then monitor social media. There is, I can tell you, so many issues that we deal with that happen outside of school on social media that then come into the school. And we know that just limiting access to cell phones during the day is not going to necessarily solve all those things, but we just ask that families really partner with us to make sure that you know what your child is doing. We have heard that students create 2 identities online. They create the one that they show to their parents, and then they create another one that they're not showing to their parents. So you might have to do some extra digging to find that, but we ask that you're aware of the social media presence. There's what is the name of that? What is the name of that book? Growing Up in Public. There's a really good resource, and I'll actually share this QR code. Growing Up in Public is another really good resource that just talks about how different it is for our kiddos to grow up in the world of social media, and for all of their mistakes to be, for the world to see. We hope this evening was informative. We hope that you had the opportunity to feel like that you have the opportunity to engage and share your opinions. And we, again, just really appreciate your ongoing engagement, ongoing support. And we'll continue to ask for that as we move through this journey next school year. So thank you.